Hanging out in that 155 tuning on the Mountain Dulcimer, key of D. We're DAA all the month of November 2019 here at Dulcimerica. My name is Bing Futch. Thank you for joining me, everybody. We started with the last episode with a reading tablature for novice and beginner mountain dulcimer players. So if you are beyond that point, you might want to skip these episodes because they are very, very basic and fundamental. But you also might want to watch just because it's always nice to get a little brush up on the basics. And that's what we're going to be doing for the entire month of November. So we talked about reading tablature. We also talked about all the different notes, from whole notes and half notes to quarter notes, 8 notes, and 16th notes, and how they all work together. And then we played through some tunes that you can download from Patreon. Now, today's show is going to be dealing with more of the same, and we're going to be including slurs, rests, and dotted notes. So again, this is looking at how to read tablature. Even if you don't know how to read standard music notation, you don't even have to do that. You can just simply go by the numbers, as it were. So all the tablature for today's episode can be downloaded from my Patreon website, which is right down below here. And I would like to thank Keith Keener, one of my patrons, for being there and for subscribing and being a part of my art. Keith, thank you very, very much. I thank all of my patrons for the work that they do every single day, working constantly in the background so that it's possible for me to do things like this. Dulcimerica episodes, new tablature, new lesson plans, and workshop descriptions. All kinds of stuff I can put out there is helped, aided by my patrons. And if you're curious about it, download today's workshop materials and also go to the featured tag section. Click on the open house tag and download everything to your heart's content. It's all for you, and if you like what you see there, education-wise, entertainment-wise, please consider becoming a patron for just $5 a month. There's a lot more where this came from. My entire back catalog is there, from my CDs and books to tablature and videos, full-length concerts, workshop video, and everything I produce every single week. So if you're interested, just $5 a month. Please do check it out and consider becoming a patron like Keith. Again, Keith, thank you very, very much. So, making sure you've downloaded all of the stuff for today's episode, let's dig on down into slurs, rests, and dotted notes. So take a look at the slurs and rests page, and you'll see in the first example there, we're in 4/4 time, and we've got 2 quarter notes at the beginning, and then we've got these notes 3 and 4 on the beats 3 and 4, and they are actually connected with this line. And what is that? That's called a slur. It's also known as a tie. These notes are tied together, which means the first note, whatever it is, it's going to extend into the next note that you see there. So at the end of that first measure, you'll see that we've got a 4 on the melody string. It's tied to another 4. Normally that quarter note would only get 1 beat, and then you'd hit that second quarter note or that next quarter note again. In this case, we're going to hit that first quarter note and then let it roll for 2 beats because they are tied together. It officially becomes a slur when the second or third or fourth note that are all tied together, if those notes are different, it becomes more of a slur. It's a way of taking the attack out of a note, doing this, as opposed to. So it takes the attack out, it smooths things out, but it also lengthens notes and gives us a different functionality when we're talking about melody and how the melody moves. It extends the life of some notes, and it has a different effect, especially when we use all of these things in conjunction. So slurs are very important. They help us to create new rhythms when we're moving melody and chords around. Also important in music is not just what we play, it's what we don't play. So even as we've got whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, 8 notes, and 16th notes, each one of those notes has a counterpart that is a rest, which means that we don't play anything for that length of time. You can see that at the end of measure 4, where we've got a half note tied to a quarter note. So a half note is going to be 2 beats, tied to a quarter note, which is normally 1 beat. So we're going to pluck that first note and then hold it for a total of 3 beats, which leaves us with 1 beat left. and we're not going to do anything on that beat. It's a quarter rest. So take a look at what that looks like in measure 4, and below it the word mute is there. So in order for us to truly hear that rest, we're going to take our strumming hand and just lay it down on the strings, and we're going to cut the sound off. So that fourth measure would go like this, hitting the 3 on the melody string for 3 beats, and then resting on the 4 and stopping the sound on the 4th beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we get a nice clean separation between the actual notes and the actual rest. And putting rests into the measure, again, helps to create some variety, some dynamics in the movement and rhythm of the melody. Those rests are going to be coming along pretty quickly at the end of the measures, so be ready for them when they show up. And these are all going to be simply quarter rests. That means we're going to hold these rests and our mute for just 1 beat. Let's go ahead and play the first exercise here. Be mindful of your different combinations, and we've got some 8 notes that are hanging out there. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. And all right, good. The next thing we're going to look at, and we're just moving through these quickly because you guys will have this stuff to actually refer to in front of you, and you can play through them. You can also play the episode back and see the demonstration, and then play it back just like that. Take a look at the bottom of that page, and I'm also, of course, putting these up on the screen for those of you who are not able to download the music. And you will see our 5 most common note values and their matching rests and what they look like. So we've got whole, half, quarter, eighth, and 16th. That, by the way, is what they all look like when they're by themselves. As we found out in the last episode, quarter notes, half notes, and whole notes are pretty much always going to look the same way. But 8th notes and 16th notes sometimes come banded together, and 8th notes come banded together in groups of 2, and there's 1 bar holding them together. 16th notes come banded together in groups of 4, and they are banded together with 2 bars. And also the 8th note has 1 flag on its stem when they're by themselves. 16th notes have 2 flags on the stem when by themselves. So let's take a look at how to count some of these things when we have notes that are tied together. Take a look at our tune, My Old Kentucky Home. One of the most helpful things you can do when you're working on a piece of music that you're not quite sure what the rhythm might be is to count through it first. And by counting through it, you'll get a real good idea about how things are supposed to sound before you actually start playing. Look at our first measure there, and you can see that we have a rest. And that rest is a half note rest. It's taking the spot of 2 beats. And then we've got 2 quarter notes following after that. How can you tell if it's a half rest or a whole rest? Well, if that little black bar is sitting below the middle line on the staff up there, then it's a whole rest. If it's above that middle line on the staff, it's a half rest. But your big clue here is that we have 2 other notes in the measure. So we know it's a half rest because the math says we've got 2 notes. That leaves 2 beats that live in that rest. We've got 2 half notes in the second measure. Each one of those gets 2 beats. In the third measure, we have a half note and 2 quarter notes. And then we've got this tricky little bit of music. That's measure 4. We have a quarter note that is tied to the first in a pair of eighth notes. That means that we're going to hold that quarter note not just for one beat, we're going to hold it for a beat and an eighth note. What's another way of saying that? Remember, an eighth note is half of a quarter note. So we could call that a beat and a half. How do you count that? We haven't been using the word half when we count. So what we have to do at this point is pulse through it. Pulsing involves subdividing through a measure using the smallest unit of rhythmic measure. Whatever the smallest note is in that measure, we're going to use that as a subdivision. That means how far can you break down each of the notes. We won't go any smaller than an eighth note. And we're going to clap through. That quarter note, the very first quarter note there, has got 2 eighth notes inside of it, but it's also tied to an eighth note. And that means we're going to clap 3 times for that first note at the 6th fret. 1, 2, 3. That eighth note now sitting there all by its lonesome. We're going to give it 1 clap by itself, followed by a quarter note which has 2 eighth notes inside of it, 2 claps. And the final beat, beat number 4, has a quarter note with 2 eighth notes inside of it, so 2 claps. If we were to subdivide 4 quarter notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, cut each one of those quarter notes in half, you have 2 eighth notes. So a subdivision of a measure full of quarter notes using eighth notes as the subdividing meter would sound like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. This is the subdivision for a measure of quarter notes. So we're going to do this with measure 4, but we're only going to clap the amount of times we need to for each one of these notes. And every time we move to a new note event, we're going to clap a little bit louder so we can very clearly hear how the rhythm is moving forward. So what we're doing is 1, 2, 3, bum, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, bum, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, bum, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2. So I keep doing that over and over again for measure 4 until I get a feel for how that's going to move. Bum, 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 bum. And then once I get that feel, I remember that feel, and then I play the notes. 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2. Hear how that's matching up there? All my subdivisions, and then I move after I have counted through, pulse through those subdivisions. 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2. And there you have your rhythm for measure number 4. So put that in context, and let's take a look at the first 4 measures there. 2 beats of a rest, and then we take our pickup notes on beats 3 and 4, which also happen to be notes 3 and 4 at frets 3 and 4. So we count in 1, 2, I'll give us a measure in, and then 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2. And there, you guys know this song, you know how it goes, and you can see how it all fits together. Pulsing is a great way of figuring out rhythms that you haven't quite gotten used to sight reading yet, and it can get trickier as you get deeper. In fact, if for some reason there were some 16th notes, even one 16th note in that measure, we'd have to use 16th notes to subdivide through all of the notes to find out how that rhythm was going to work. All right, so with that in mind, Notice that we've got some other situations like that. Measure number 12, for example, has got that same rhythm. We've got other ties here as well. Measure number 5. Measure number 8's got a big old whole note that's then tied to a half note. That means we're going to hold that whole note for 6 beats. So let's go ahead and take a run at My Old Kentucky Home. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. My Old Kentucky Home, and we're only playing that on the melody string. It still sounds really good. One of the cool things I like about the mountain dulcimer, you don't have to play chords. You can just play the melody the old school way and let that drone shine on. Fun stuff. All right, another way of looking at lengthening notes and combining notes would be using the dotted method. So if you see a note with a dot following it, that means that we've added half of the value of that note to itself. So a dotted quarter note, for example, we know that half of the value of a quarter note is an eighth note. So if you have a dotted quarter note, that means we're adding an eighth note to the 2 eighth notes already inside the quarter note for a total of 3 eighth notes. So whenever you add a dot to the value of a note, you are adding half of the value of that note to itself. Some people prefer to work with slurs and some people prefer to work with dots. It depends on what you're looking for. Some people can find it a lot easier to count using slurs because the actual note values that have been suspended or added are right there in front of you. With the dot, you have to kind of do the math in your head, but the dot itself can be very helpful in creating a more economical score. Let's take a look at Ode to Joy by Beethoven over here on the 3rd page of the tablature. And if you haven't downloaded this yet, make sure you use the link that's up on the screen right now to download this so you have a visual reference and a resource for later on when you want to try this stuff as you're working through your experience with the mountain dulcimer. So once again, we are adding a half of the value to a note if it's got a dot. Take a look at measure number 4. You can see where that's happening. There we have a quarter note and it's got a dot right there. So it's going to have 3 eighth notes, and then you'll see an eighth note following it, and then you see a half note. So the math adds up. There's 3 eighth notes inside the dotted quarter note. There's 1 eighth note inside of the eighth note. So together you've got 4 eighth notes, which means you can combine those to create 2 quarter notes. That's 2 beats. That leaves you with a half note, 2 beats, the math adds up. So pulsing through that last measure, 3 eighth notes for the dotted quarter note. 1, 2, 3. 1 clap for the eighth note. 1. 4 claps for the half note. 1, 2, 3, 4. Working that measure with the subdivision and clapping louder every single time I move to a new note event, we end up with this. 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. Bum, 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 bum. And once you get the rhythm feel, put the notes in there, and then you'll get a sense for how that measure is supposed to go. That same exact rhythm is in measure number 8. And then we've got some combinations of quarter notes, 8 notes, other things happening. And then our old friend the tie comes sneaking in. Our slur comes sneaking in at measure number 12, and it's introducing something entirely different. What's happening there is on the 4th beat of measure 12, we have a quarter note that's being tied to the downbeat of measure number 13. So that first of all means that that 5 on the melody string, when we strike it on the 4th beat of measure 12, we're going to hold it for 2 beats. And we're not going to strike or pick on the downbeat of measure number 13. This is called a push rhythm. A push rhythm is when we take the downbeat of a measure and we push it so that it comes in a little bit early. And it sounds really cool, and it's one of the reasons that Ode to Joy has got such an interesting feeling to it, because it's been on the money. When it comes in, that melody note comes in on the downbeat every single time, except for this. It comes in a little bit early. So be prepared for that, and then we wrap up in measure number 16 with that same pattern that we developed. Dotted quarter note, 8 note, half note. So let's go ahead and play Ode to Joy in DAA tuning with our dotted notes and our push rhythm. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. One, two, three, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. One, two. And there you have Ode to Joy, and working with dotted notes and also working with the push rhythm in that as well. Go ahead and hang on to the resource material, play through, repeat the episode, play through again, and get nice and used to reading some of these different combinations of notes. They're going to pop up a lot as you start getting into more and more challenging mountain dulcimer tablature. But you'll come to a point where you start seeing some of these same combinations over and over again because they're very, very common. And once you get to that point, without having to count through or do any of the math in your head, you'll be able to look at it, know how it goes, and simply play it. Trust me, the more you play and the more you apply yourself, the more one day you'll look up one day and just go, oh, I know that. And that's what we're aiming for. Repetition, thoughtful practice, and by all means, please do it every single day because we all fight to stay on the horse sometimes and there's a lot of distractions out there. So practice every day and know that all of this stuff will eventually soak in and you'll be able to call it up whenever you want to. Thanks again, everybody, for watching. We're going to continue our study of some of these beginning and novice level fundamentals, as well as moving towards understanding more about DAA tuning and some of the things that it offers. Thanks again for being here, everybody. Keep playing every day, and we'll see you next time.